event. Welcome everyone to today's post-film discussion of Telling Nonie, featuring Avi Ben-Hur and Paz Schwartz. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, I am Ellen Resnick, the Educational Programs and Outreach Manager at Classrooms Without Borders. At CWB, we are dedicated to providing immersive learning experiences that engage educators and the broader community in meaningful conversations about history, justice, and reconciliation, much like the themes explored in today's film. Over the past decade, we've reached over 87,000 participants through more than 600 virtual programs, connecting individuals from across the globe to explore critical issues that both open minds and hearts. The film Telling Nonie explores the Yom Kippur themes of forgiveness and redemption. It follows Gazir Shafar, a former Israeli agent haunted by his role in the 1950s Gaza assassinations, seeking redemption as he contacts the daughter of the Egyptian colonel he killed. This story powerfully reflects the challenges of facing the past and seeking forgiveness, making it especially meaningful during Yom Kippur. Your participation in discussions like these support our mission of Classrooms Without Borders to explore the intersection of history, personal narratives, and broader social and legal frameworks that shape our world today. If you'd like to contribute to our ongoing efforts, the donation link is available for you in the chat. Every contribution helps continue our offering of these transformative experiences. It is now my honor to introduce our guests. First, Avi Ben-Hur, our CWB Scholar in Residence, whose extensive expertise in Holocaust studies, education, and geopolitics will guide us through today's discussion. Joining Avi is Paz Schwartz, a director, journalist, and media professional whose work has illuminated complex topics such as the Arab-Israeli conflict and national security through a deeply personal lens. Paz's documentary work has been featured on the Yes documentary channel, Channel 13, and the Israeli Public Broadcasting Corporation. Her insights will add rich depth to today's conversation. Please feel free to send your questions directly to Avi in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them during our discussion. And with that, Avi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Paz, especially for joining us. For us, it's this evening from myself and for Paz. For you, it's this afternoon. It's now after 10 o'clock at night. I'm broadcasting from Jerusalem, and Paz is somewhere near in Tel Aviv. So we're not too far from each other. I'm sure that the irony of seeing this film now is not lost on anybody. Of course, the irony itself, if I can call it irony, is highlighted at the very, very end of the film. Everybody understood here that the filming ends at 2022, and of course, we know a year later what happens and so on and so forth, and we'll also address that. I'm saying that because we take for granted, now that it's 75 years later, that there is something called the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is new. Gaza Strip appears in the wake of what we call here a war for independence. There's no such animal, there's no such geographic territory in world history, in Middle Eastern geography, called the Gaza Strip before 1949. There was a Gaza City. Gaza City is an historic city. Gaza City is as old as Jerusalem is. Gaza's got thousands of years of history. That's something that is fine. And Gaza is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as well as one of the 5 Philistine city-states. But a strip with a population, this is something that is a result of our war in 47 to 49. And in fact, the Egyptians are going to conquer that territory, which had been allotted for the Palestinian Arabs as part of the state they rejected. They rejected the two-state solution in November 29, 1947. The Egyptians are going to capture that area. They'll be pushed out of the Negev, pushed down to that area, which they will hold on to. In contrast to what the Jordanians do with the West Bank, also known as Judea and Samaria, and East Jerusalem, that is to say, the Jordanians are going to officially annex the West Bank and annex East Jerusalem and make it officially part of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. In contrast to that, the Egyptians never annex the Gaza Strip. They're going to have a military occupation for 19 years there. And that's very, very important because that's part of the story here. It's a key and core part of the story. Now, having said that, immediately after the war's over, and the war And again, when is the war? When is the Israeli war for independence over? It depends on who you ask. Actual fighting ends in January of 1949, but in March of 49, we so-called conquered what today is known as Eilat, the Bay of Eilat, but there really wasn't too much fighting going on. The real fighting is over in January 49. But what I want to say is the following. We know, and here I don't want to get into a whole debate about the numbers themselves. In 1949, Israel claimed that there were 550,000 Palestinian refugees. The Palestinians claimed there were 1.1 million. The UN, the United States, and the UK said about 750,000, which is more or less the halfway number, but actually, or 780,000, which is actually the number of people they were feeding. The UNRWA, which is just established, that was feeding. Just in brackets, my master's thesis was about the U.S. policy towards the Palestinian refugees. So I actually did a deep dive into the primary sources. It's about 750,000 people. You had about 100,000 flee to what turned into the Gaza Strip. What that means is that in 1949 forward, something like 75 to 80% of the Arabs living in the Gaza Strip for those 19 years under the Egyptian occupation were Palestinian refugees. Okay, they were refugees. Many of them were refugee camps. This is important because it festers. I'll say now in brackets, even though it's kind of beyond the scope chronologically of our discussion and also the film itself, the PLO was established in the Gaza Strip in a refugee camp in 1964. Okay, it's not within the scope of our discussion, but I just want to give you a sense of that. This is very important. And in as much as you had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees who were just over the border, you want to call it that way, whether it's in Lebanon, okay, or in Jordan, okay, which included the West Bank, okay, or in Syria or in Egypt. In this case, we're talking about the Gaza Strip. We had many, many people, and it was thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of people trying to, we call them infiltrate, okay, back into the country. And for all kinds of reasons, some people wanted to come home. Some of them wanted to get back to their homes, their fields. Some of them came as terrorists. They came to kill Jews. Okay, so we have different reasons why people are coming in. In any event, we're going to find in the 1950s, specifically on the Egyptian and Jordanian fronts, but also to a certain extent on the Syrian front as well, we're going to have more and more of these infiltrations are going to be perpetrated by terrorists. And they're not coming to harvest their crops. They're there to kill Israeli Jews, and most of that is going to take place either along the Israeli-Jordanian frontier or along the Israeli-Egyptian frontier. Note, I don't say border because there were no borders at the time. They weren't official borders. They are now because we have peace, but they weren't borders then. The armistice lines, they were crossing and they were committing acts of terror. So we could say that between 1950 and 1956, on average, 7 to 8 Israelis were murdered, terror attacks every single year on each of these fronts. Okay, Egyptian side or Jordanian side, and virtually all the murders were committed by Palestinians, not by Egyptian army or by Jordanian army. They weren't coming in as terrorists infiltrating to Israel. We're talking about Palestinians who were coming in. Those that were infiltrating from Egypt were called Fedayeen or Fedayun. What the film also clarifies to a certain extent, but I'll kind of broaden the scope a little bit right now, is that it's fairly clear that the initial infiltrations were at the initiative of the Palestinians themselves. At some point, the Egyptians took control over it. Same thing on the Jordanian side. In both cases, this was kind of like either the Egyptian or Jordanians kind of like releasing the pressure, okay, because they were sitting on top of a lot of refugees there. And of course, they didn't want to take responsibility for it. The Israeli response in what we call the era of retaliations was that we would retaliate, but we would say, no, if this came from Egyptian-controlled territory, then Egypt, the sovereign Egypt, who's sovereign there, are responsible, and they're the ones who are going to pay the price. And therefore, when we cross the border or cross the frontier, okay, we would attack Egyptian soldiers or Egyptian police, those symbols of the Egyptian regime. Same is true for the most part, in Jordan. Okay, So we basically said, you're responsible for this. You can control it, you can stop it, okay, and therefore we're going to take you. We're going to take you're going to take responsibility for it. Now, something else is very important because he figures in the film, and also I think we have to make some clarify a little bit about the personality. So Gamal Nasser, who was considered one of the most charismatic and important leaders in the Arab world, certainly from the mid 1950s until the late 1960s, is going to emerge as the undisputed head or president of Egypt in 1954. Okay, there's going to be an officer's coup in 1952, and over the course of about 2 years, Nasser will take complete control over Egypt. What he starts to do almost immediately is to apply a lot of pressure on the British to remove their troops. The British had very significant bases and very significant troop formations along the Suez Canal zone. And this had to do with two things from a British perspective. The first was the Suez Canal was and still is a very important international maritime waterway, international trade. That's number one. And number two, the British still self-perceived that they were a world power, okay? And they thought their forward base was very important for the Cold War. In the case of a Cold War turning into a real war with the Soviet Union, they would be bombing the oil fields of the Caucasus as part of the Soviet Union. And the closest they could get would be from the area, either from the Americans from Turkey and the British from the Suez Canal zone. In any event, it doesn't matter. The British were no longer a world power, but they aspired to be what they were, and they were not so interested. But Nasser wanted the British out because it was also a symbol. It was a symbol of Egyptian sovereignty. There's a lot of pressure on the British. The American administration, Eisenhower administration, was actually friendly to Nasser, didn't perceive them as a rival, and they also applied some pressure on the British to leave the area there. Israel saw this as a threat, and what we have in 1954 is something that's known as the Lavon Affair. Some of you may have heard of it, or loosely translated from the Esek Bish in Hebrew to the kind of nasty business or bad business. Essentially, we had a rogue operation where we took Israeli spies and Egyptian Jews, some of them Karaites, and we had them put explosives into American and British-owned cultural institutions, that the movie theaters or libraries. They're supposed to blow them up after hours, those that get hurt, and then the blame was supposed to be on all kinds of, Islamic, fundamentalists, Egyptian communists, to make the Egyptians look bad, and maybe the British would feel that they want to stay. It was kind of a cockamamie, stupid operation. The prime minister at the time was Moshe Sharet. Those are the 2 years that Sharet was in power, and Ben-Gurion was in the wilderness, literally and figuratively. And it was done behind his back. He didn't even know about it. I'm talking about Moshe Sharet did not even know about the operation. What we learned many years later was that there was a double agent. An Israeli agent was actually an agent for the Egyptians, and he actually gave up the Israelis to the Egyptians. There were 2 committed suicide, 2 were hanged, another 7 received. I'm talking about the Israeli agents, Israeli and Egyptian Jewish agents. 7 received various lengths of sentencing in prison. Israel did not take any responsibility. Sharet's government fell. Ben-Gurion came back. Pinchas Lavon, who was the Minister of Defense, who didn't know anything about the operation but was blamed for it, was forced out. It was a big blunder. It was a big screw up. The following year, 1955, you have what's called the Czech Arms Agreement, where Czechoslovakia was green lighted by the Soviet Union to sell game-changing weaponry. I'm talking about sophisticated, for the time, airplanes, missiles, or anti-aircraft missiles, tanks, and so on and so forth. And this was a game changer because Israel felt very threatened by that. Very threatened by that. The sense was that the arms race, or let's put, the Egyptians now had better equipment than Israel had. That was the sense in Israel. In 1956, also the Egyptians ultimately are going to nationalize the Suez Canal. And this is the context for the assassination also that's going to be taking place. that we talk about in the film. So that's also important to say. Having said, sorry, that takes place earlier, but it's also part of it. One of the things we have to talk about as well is this story about Rui Rothberg, who was mentioned in the film, both as a cousin, I think a cousin of one of the protagonists, but also as somebody who was known in Israel. He himself wasn't really known. He was a kid. He was a young guy. He was like 21 years old. But the eulogy that Moshe Dayan said for him after he was murdered by this Fedayun is it's a canonical text in Israel. Everybody knows it. Some of that text was read by Dayan in the film, but I want to read some of the text that wasn't there because I think it's going to resonate very deeply for what's happening right now, just on October 7th. So with your permission, this is Dayan speaking at Rui Rothberg's funeral. Let us not cast accusations at the murderers today. Why should we blame them for their burning hatred of us? For 8 years, they have been, this is 1956, right? So for 8 years, you'll crunch the numbers. Okay, for 8 years, they have been dwelling in Gaza's refugee camps. As before their eyes, we had transformed the land and the villages in which they and their forefathers had dwelt into our own property. We are the generation of settlement. Without a steel helmet and the muzzle of the cannon, we will not be able to plant a tree and build a home. Our children will not have a life if we do not dig shelters, and without barbed wire and machine guns, we will not be able to pave roads and dig water wells. Millions of Jews who were exterminated because they had no land are looking at us from the ashes of Israeli history and ordering us to settle and resurrect a land for our people. But beyond the border's furrow, an ocean of hatred and an urge for vengeance rises, waiting for the moment that calm will blunt our readiness, for the day that we will heed the ambassadors of conspiring hypocrisy who call upon us to put down our arms. Let us not flinch from seeing the loathing that accompanies and fills the lives of hundreds of thousands of Arabs who dwell around us and await the moment they can reach out for our blood. Let us not avert our eyes, lest our hands grow weak. This is the destiny of our generation. This is the choice of our lives, to be ready and armed and strong and tough. For if the sword falls from our fist, our lives will be cut down. It's a text from 1956, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, from 1956. Okay, and it resonates so strongly, I think, for where we are right now, from October 7th forward. Let me please remind you that it's ironically, Moshe Dayan was one of the peacemakers with Egypt. He was one of the people who was for peace. It took the Yom Kippur War of 1973, something that's resonating for us again till today in Israeli society. It took the Yom Kippur War to make a major shift, and 4 years later, we have Sadat visit Israel. And within 6 years of the Yom Kippur War in 1979, we have the signing of peace between Israel and Egypt. And here my last words before I engage Paz, because this is much more important than everything I'm saying right now, is to talk about the film. The peace treaty between Israel and Egypt has had its ebbs and flows. Okay, it was stunning when it happened. I'll remind you, in 1979, we signed a peace treaty. We pull out in a very short period of time of the Sinai Peninsula. There was a dispute over who should control Taba. We agreed to mediation. We lost the mediation. We gave up Taba. In 1982, we invaded Lebanon, the first Lebanon War, or Operation Peace for the Galilee, but we now call it the First Lebanon War because we've had a second one. And now, actually, I suspect what we have right now is going to be called the third. Just FYI, I think we have right now is going to be called the Third Lebanon War, but just I don't want to put I don't want to put a patent on it yet, but I suspect it's going to happen. First Lebanon War, 1982. It ruffled the feathers, but it didn't tear down the peace treaty in Egypt. In 2012, when Mubarak was deposed as part of the so-called Arab Spring, you had a guy called I'm losing it now. El-Sisi now, who was before El-Sisi, who did he depose? I'm having a senior moment now. It'll come to me. You had the representative of the Muslim Brotherhood who was elected fair and square, okay, in place of Mubarak. And then we were faced with what we like to call the $64,000 question, because the Muslim Brotherhood kept saying from the moment the peace was signed between Israel and Egypt, the first thing they took over was they were going to destroy El-Morsi. Okay, it came up. El-Morsi was elected, represented the Muslim Brotherhood, and they kept saying for years, for decades, when they take control, the first thing to do is they abrogate and tear down the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty. And lo and behold, they didn't. Not only did they not tear it down, but we had a very serious altercation between Israel and Hamas in 2012. It was El Morsi who mediated between us and Hamas. So lo and behold, this treaty is not because they fell in love with our pretty eyes, but because both sides need this treaty. I'm saying that because as I speak, as the words that come out of my mouth right now, the treaties in Israel and Egypt it's shaking. It's shaking. In the last year, Egypt has been, for our purposes, a much more trustworthy and better mediator than Qatar. We trust the Egyptians more than we trust Qatar. We talk more with Egyptians than we talk with Qatar. Okay. Having said that, once we took over the so-called the Philadelphia corridor, Rafiach, this has undermined our relationship with Egypt. And there's real fears now. This is the last thing I'm going to say. Latest things in the news. This is hot off the press from today or yesterday. The Egyptians are very much worried about what's going to happen between Israel and Iran, and that maybe our offshore oil deposits are going to be attacked. And they get 15% of their energy from us, and they're worried about where they get energy from. So there's all kinds of stuff happening now between Israel and Egypt, which is not good. Okay, but we've weathered the storm before. So without further ado, so Paz, please unmute, because we came here to hear from Paz, not so much from me. So Paz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So
Hey.
the first obvious question is, what is your connection to the story? Like, are you related to a protagonist? How did you get involved in this story?
So first of all, thank you for having me, and good night. Here it's good night, and for you it's good morning. So it's nice to see you all from Tel Aviv. Well, actually, the story I got the story through a personal story. My grandmother died. It was through the COVID time, and we are very, very close family. Only two. I have my mother and her sister, and we're 4 grandkids of our grandmother. And we thought that we knew everything about her, but when she died, we did the shiva, very, very only us, and we found very old love letters in her boidim, in her closet, up in her closet, just hidden, yellowed, very old love letters from a guy named Yuda Cohen. And it was the love letter took part at the 1947, 1948. My grandmother was in the Palmach in Kibbutz Dafna, and she was apparently in love with a guy named Yuda Cohen, who was older than her in 2 years. And I was intrigued. I'm a journalist, I'm a filmmaker, and I didn't want to let go of my grandmother. So I started like a personal quest to find out who's this Yuda Cohen. And then I started looking, I went to the Palmach Museum, and actually I found like a picture of him and with my grandmother, and they were like the power couple of the Garin of the Palmach. They were looking so good, and I started to ask, who's this Yuda Cohen? And then they told me he joined the Mossad afterwards, and that made it even more interesting for me as a journalist. And so I started looking up who is this Yuda Cohen, and I found out that he was the Amafil Shel Eli Cohen.
He was the agent who was in charge of Eli Cohen.
He was in charge of the Eli Cohen, the most famous Israeli spy. So it was even more interesting. And then I started looking, and I found Yuda Cohen was a member in he was an agent in the Mossad, and he joined another agent named Gezi Tzafrio. that was the only thing that I could lead me to this Yehuda Cohen. And I found up, I looked for Gazy's number, and I called him. Hi, I said, I'm Paz Schwartz. I'm a journalist. I lost my grandmother, and I'm looking for a guy named Yehuda Cohen. He's supposed to be 90 years old now. Maybe you know him. You served together in the Mossad, and he told me, come to meet me in my apartment in Ramat Sharon. And I came, and we sat, and I started telling him about this those love letters. And he said that he knows Yehuda Cohen, but he's not in touch with him for the last 50 years. But I was in his salon, in his living room, and he served tea and nice cookies. So I started to ask him about his life story. And it was fascinating. He was in the Mossad. He served in Lebanon, and in Egypt, and in Iran. And I was fascinating, and I do movies for a living. So I said, okay, I'm gonna here's which story will I take from your life? What can we do together? And like before I went, I asked him, from all of your career, is there one story that still lingers, that you still think about? And this old man went to his bedroom and came out with a book that which is called Now They Call Me Infidel. It's Noni Darwish book. And he told me, this is a book written by Noni Darwish. Her father, Mustafa Hafez, Colonel Mustafa Hafez, I was a part of I was involved of his assassination when I was 22 years old. And I emailed her, and we are corresponding. And I have a dream to meet her. And I asked him, but does she know that you took part in the assassination? And he said, no, this is something you have to tell her when I meet her. And I was like, I went down, I said, okay, I have a movie. And that's how it started. This journey that took 3 years. I came out of his house. I have a very a friend that is my editor. I told her I have a Netflix movie here. This is something international. And what I did is just I started to look for Noni Darwish in Facebook, and I wrote to her, told her that I'm a reporter, I'm a journalist. I told her that I read her book. Actually, I read all of her books, and I started telling her that I want to make a documentary about her. And I called her, and we even talked, but things didn't click. It was like because of the distance, because of the time, I don't know, because of the even it, like, she didn't think I'm serious. And I had a producer, which is very she's cool. So she told me, if Noni was living in in Tel Aviv, you would go knock on her door, right? So go to LA, knock on her door. And that's what I did. That's how it happened.
Okay, and so that's a very cool story.
Mhm.
And how hard was it to convince her to participate? And even I have to say your opening, the guy who opens the opening scene, he seemed to be, who was friends of Gacy, he seemed to be a little bit hesitant, like about the whole story. Like he was a little bit, at least it appeared as if he was a little bit, like
He's
he
like
wasn't,
the
like he
Joker
wouldn't do
in
it.
the
Like he
film.
wouldn't do it.
Yeah. He's like the most, Nathan Rahav, the guy that opens the film, the guy that built, like he was in charge of all the bombs that were sent on the first targeted assassination in Israel, and apparently there were a few, and he did it all in his hands, and I was like, I couldn't believe that I found the guy. He's 93 years old, and I thought, and he was cleared in his mind, And I thought, while making the movie, we thought, how are we going to לשחזר, to reconstruct, yeah, to the image of the building the bomb. We thought we would do it with an actor. We thought we would do it in archive. But and then I when I met Nathan, I told Nathan, the guy that built the bombs, I told him, how did you do it? And he was like, he sat like that. And when I told him, he was like, oh, I took a book and I just started to rip it from inside. And I took, and I saw him coming alive. So I asked him, do you want to do it? Like, can you show me? And for me, it was crazy because he was 93 years old, but he was back in in the moment. He was so that, like, his hands were so didn't shake or didn't. He was back in the moment. And for me to see those people that engaged in things that are, from my perspective, in the present time, they killed people, they did some bad things, and bad things, or they did it for Israel. It was interesting for me to see how they reflect about those operation, like 60, 70 years after. And what interests me is the humanity of everything in this conflict, from both sides. And the humanity is there always. It's in the person. It's not in the politics. It's in the human motive, that maybe even 60 years later, the redemption, they want the Gazi wants to find out the daughter of the man he was involved in his killing, and it reflects on his relationship to his son, that he wasn't a good father to him. And Nathan started trying to hide all this operation, but they're still there, trying to come up and surface from beneath. So that's it.
There's a scene in the film where Natan tells that Gazi that basically what they've now discovered is that the officer that they assassinated, in fact, was trying to prevent the infiltrations, the terror attacks. Okay, and that Nasser didn't agree with him. Okay, but he's about to pull him out, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, is that something that you chronologically, is that the way it played out, or Gazi already knew that when you started talking to him?
No, we didn't know it, but that's something that like, this is like I knew in there's three main characters from the Israeli side. Gazi, the Mossad agent that did initiate the connection between Nonie, Nathan that built the bomb, and he doesn't want to meet Nonie. He doesn't want to deal with the past. And Ini Abadi, who was the Gaza governor in the 1970s. And I knew about him. I knew he was in the Mossad. I knew he was in the Mossad with Nathan and with Gazi in Kurdistan. And I knew that he thinks that Mustafa Hafez is not a bad guy. I knew that this is that's what he thinks. And so I called him, and he told me a crazy story. He told me that when he was in Kurdistan with Gazi and Natan, he heard about this targeted assassination of Mustafa Hafez. But when he was in the Gaza governed in 1970, after the 1967 war, he came to Gaza, and the first thing he wanted to find out is what was the Egyptian laws about the infiltration, and he went to the basement of the law offices of what they were the Egypt left there, and he actually had the original book from 1956, and he took him back to his home in Ghana, and what it shows that at the first years, the first, like until 1954, I think, or until 1956, the infiltration was not the Egyptian didn't send it. Wasn't
Not their initiative.
Yazum
It was not their
initiative.
initiative.
It was just like a random terrorist that infiltrated, or maybe not even terrorist. But after the retaliation operation, they changed their operation mode, and they started to send terrorists. And Mustafa Hafez was the like, I think he was the first leader of this Palestinian resistance out of Gaza. So I thought that it's so interesting that Gacy doesn't even know this information, and he was involved in this operation and he never knew it. So the meeting between those two people in this scene was something that I initiated, but the response was very authentic.
You think he had you think Gacy had any kind of a guilty conscience? Like what was his motivation deep down to meet with her?
I think I thought about it a lot, and so I think deep inside you want to when you're, I think, coming to a certain age, you want to clear the table, to certain wounds, to heal them, you go back to the past. And I think that even family matters that you want to engage now, you do it. Like, I think he wanted to be closer to his son, and that's a way to do it through dealing with her, with Nonie. Like, I think it's maybe even that. And also I think that he is a Mossad very slick person, and he all of his life he was looking for like good Arabs to recruit. I think that he was out for his last mission. He was out to recruit her. That's what I think. He was out to, he saw her as something that he can connect to. But what happened when they met was so fabulous. Like the connection, it wasn't shown in the movie, because the movie needs its drama elements. But before this, the time that they met in the border, they clicked. Like, they clicked so much that I thought that maybe they're gonna hit off, those two. I thought maybe it's gonna come out of an affair here. So but that was amazing. And they're still friends until today.
Can I ask you a question? Were they communicating in Arabic?
Yeah,
Because
Arabic and
it's so clear, it's so
English.
obvious to me that he's super fluent in Arabic, okay, and
Yeah.
that it would be intuitive and natural for him to speak to her not in English, but in Arabic, and her as well. And I mean, it wasn't missing in the film, but there was a conscious effort on your part to have them speak in English and not in Arabic, right?
Because she's more she doesn't like to speak in Arabic so much. So she started talking. She started talking English all the time. But they had like they spoke in Arabic, and they had this Mediterranean connection between them.
Can you let's imagine for a second, even though it's impossible for us, let's imagine that October 7th didn't happen. Okay, for a moment. Okay, I want to go back to your final scene where they're sitting in the Gaza envelope. Okay, they're sitting like on the edge of one of the kibbutzim, maybe in Kibbutz Kfar Aza, if like what I'm looking at, it may have been Kibbutz Kfar Aza. When I see that, maybe I'm wrong, but they're looking into, I don't know, Beit Hanun, or they're looking into one of the Gazan towns or Gaza City, and the sun's going down. What did you want to convey to the audience at that moment? What are you trying to tell us? And you didn't have, obviously, you didn't have a crystal ball. You didn't know October 7th was going to happen the following year after you filmed this. So what were you trying to tell us? Because it's so hard for us now to look at that scene without everything that's happened in the last year of our lives here. But I want you to try to do that. What are you trying to tell us there?
It was 7 months before October 7th. This scene was shot. It was on the border of Gaza, just in front of Nahal Oz. They were sitting there looking at Gaza, and he confided. He told her his part, and she told him how she felt. And at this specific moment, that was two people connect. He felt her pain. She felt him. They wanted each other's forgiveness, but they weren't sorry but like it was just acknowledging each other's pain. And it was so beautiful, and so it gave me so much hope. We filmed this scene, and I was like, they were sitting there holding hands, and I was like texting for everyone I know. You don't know what, like, it was peace. I made peace. I felt that everything could happen. And it's so funny. I'm now thinking maybe there was a tunnel behind behind that place while I was like so naive. I was so naive. And actually 7 months after, when the movie was premiered in Haifa Festival, it won as the most the best documentary film. And on October 5th, I was so excited because they gave me the prize, and I took the prize, and I said, if such a meeting can take place on the border of Gaza between the daughter of our worst enemy and the man that was involved in her father's death, if such meeting could take place, and anything can happen. That was on October 5th. And 2 days later, we woke up to the
sky fell down on us. Everything's collapsed. So what gives you hope right now? What is your next project? Okay, I mean 2 days after you had this really good flush, you felt great. Everything collapsed for you, for me, for everybody here, and obviously for between us and Gaza. But give us what gives you hope? What are you doing next? What are you doing now?
So I have to say that, like, I was on October 7th in the morning. I have 3 kids, and we woke up to the sirens, and then, like, when it was 7 a.m., we started hearing from friends of us, very good friends of us, that lives in Be'eri, Kibbutz Be'eri. And he was talking to my husband. He's my husband's best friend. And he was telling him, we are in the mamad, me and the kids.
In the safe room. In the
same safe room. And we hear, and there's a terrorist in the kibbutz. And when I heard it, I had a panic attack. And what happened to me, actually, I took my first half of Clonex and I fell asleep until the night. Okay, my husband woke me up in the night, and and told me everything. I was so, from the fear, my body shut down. And when I woke up, I heard that I asked immediately, how is Ilya? Ilya is the friend. So he told me, Ilya is okay, but the kids are gone. And Lior, his 16 years old son, was murdered, and Gali, who was 14, was kidnapped. And for this, I was like, for like 2 weeks, I was a zombie. I couldn't leave my house. We were like in panic. We're still in the trauma here, yeah. But what happened is that I felt like I'm losing myself, and what I did is one of my friends had told me, Paz, you need to go out, do what you do best, go here, go and find this story. So I started to go like instinctively to Lior friends, the 16-year-old kids from Be'eri, Kibbutz Be'eri, 17-year-olds old, and I started making articles about them. And then I heard that they're establishing a school where in the evacuation places, and I started documenting that. And then I heard that the seniors, Shministim, the seniors, the seniors are not coming to the school because they are spread, the seniors from the Otef Aza, from the kibbutzim and their mushavim from Otef Aza are spread all around Israel. And they are not, they want to finish high school together. They want to build, to form a boarding school just for them. They want to do something with hope. And I was like, I went just after them. And for the last 8 months, I'm documenting this incredible children from the OTEF, 8 seniors that are going to join the army now. But they built a boarding school and they finished high school together. And they had a prom, and they had they succeeded to finish together because they want to be together, because this year they couldn't go through it without each other. And the children, one of them is the grandfathers were kidnapped. Everyone there lost fathers. Everyone there had their loss. But for me, the documenting them made me hope that maybe we can come through this, come over this situation. I hope.
Thank you so much. I'm going to look at questions that were sent into the chat. So give me a second. See what we've got. Okay. Second. In the movie, we observe when he tells Nonie he was involved, we never see a full confession on his part. Obviously, she had to find out at some point. What happened when she did learn the whole truth? The question is, what, when Nonie when he actually told her, what was her reaction?
I think it doesn't matter if he pulled the trigger or I think after she came to America and after the 9/11, she had like a turning point of her, what she felt towards what she called radical Islam. And she also feels sorry for things her father did. So it was like, she forgave him, and she wanted to be forgiven of all the people that her father killed. It was like something that they connected from she also buried this, like her conscience is also filled with what she was raised. She was raised to radical Islam, to hate Israel, to kill. So for her, hearing him, it was like two people connect from the same place. So she forgave him.
Okay, here's another question, and I have to admit I don't remember the scene, but it says the question from Susan is, was the woman in the hot tub with Gazy, his wife. I don't remember something with a hot tub.
No.
Um, I
There's
must be wrong.
there's a scene in the Gacy is swimming in the in the like a public swimming pool, and there's a jacuzzi there, and they sat, and there was a woman, and she told him, and we when I see this movie now, it's crazy the scene, because she's asking him, who is the leader of the Hamas now? Why can't we take him? Anwar, why can't we take him out? And he was like, who? Yassin, we took him out. No, Yassin. Anwar. And then she tells him, if I was the president, I would just wipe up Gaza. I would invite Putin and in what like that's so it's crazy to hear this like old woman that was just like a neighbor in the swimming pool. Maybe if Sinwar wasn't here, maybe we wouldn't be here
It's
today.
very interesting. It has to be said, but people know that Israeli security establishment for several years before October 7th was pushing Netanyahu to take out Sinwar. Just so you know that that's something that's come up in the news a fair amount. Okay. So Susan, different Susan's asking, I'm still unclear whether or not Nonie's father was responsible for training the infiltrators or not. He was honored by Nasser, who came to his funeral, and Nasser asked the children who was going to kill Jews in retaliation for their father's death. So it's hard to believe Nonie's father was not responsible for the infiltrators and would go against Nasser's program. So you want to clarify?
No, so maybe I wasn't clear. He was responsible of those infiltrators and those terrorists. He was um, our worst enemy in the 50s. But what revealed in what Ini's book, that at the like for the first years, if we believe what is in the books, yeah, maybe it's a camouflage, like maybe but if we believe those papers, at the first years, like until he was sent there at 1952, I think. So like the 3 years before making his army, he was not, he wanted quiet. But when Nasser changed after the retaliation operation, that's what Ini said. After it was like constant pressure from both sides, Mustafa Hafez was the head of operation that killed here a lot of people, and he was rightfully taken off. He's not a good person. And even Noni remembers it. She remembers operation that she remembers the celebrating of death in her house, that when they came back from operation and they like celebrated when they succeeded. So I think that, as maybe he had like his first phase and the next phase, and it probably was who led it was Nasser. He was like a loyal soldier to Nasser. And what Ini says is, when Nasser, the first year of Nasser, Israel wasn't in his top he wanted to make revelation מהפכה במצרים. ישראל לא הייתה בכוונות שלו.
He was looking inwards. He was trying to revolutionize Egypt and modernize it and lift the economy up and take people out of poverty.
Israel wasn't in his top priority, but when things were started to heat up in the Gaza border, or in those borders that were not quiet, he started to he understood how he gained as a politician. He understood how he can gain power out of attacking Israel, out of making this conflict benefit him. And actually, I think, I don't know, maybe if Gaza was still at the Egypt property. It's our our whole situation was different today.
So I did all the questions in the chat, but I want to ask you a question that just come to my mind right now. So you won in the Haifa Film Festival. You won this prize in first prize in 5th of October, and then we had the 7th of October. Do you think that Israelis would go to see the film now? It would interest them, given this nightmare. I don't want to call it a dream. We're in a nightmare. The nightmare that we're completely in at this moment. Also vis-a-vis Gaza. Do you think people have the headspace to see a film like this? It's a film of hope at this moment. It's not criticism. I'm asking your opinion. I'm asking you
no, I think I'm not objective, because I think this movie is more important to see now. It's even more important to see it now. Do they want to see it now? In Israel, I think less, but in the Jewish communities all around the world, I see that people are relating to this story, and not only Jewish community. This film was just last week. It was the closing film 2 weeks ago. It was the closing film in the human rights film festival in Albania. It's going to be screened in Hong Kong. It's going to be screened in Silicon Valley next week. So I think it will. I think that in the world that this message of tolerance is more has more space now, or more room. Israel maybe not so.
I'll share with you and everybody here. My middle child is doing her military service right now, and I told her about the film, and she actually wants to see it. So she's coming home on Sunday. We'll watch it together. I think it'll be interesting for her to see it. There was another question that just popped up a second ago, which was, did you ever meet your grandma's lover?
It's a good question. That's a good question. So actually, we found this Yehuda Cohen. We found him, and me and my sister went with his old love letters that he wrote when he was 17 years old to his house, and we gave it back to him. And actually, like 2 years ago, he passed away, and I was in his funeral. And before he died, we corresponded by, he had this, he wrote like SMS, but like messages. He wrote it down on a paper, and he took a picture and he sent it to me as a picture. And he wrote, like he used to call me, like, called Grandpa Yuda. So it was so touching for me that the story ended like that. And when I stood in his funeral, this is my son woke up. When I stood in his funeral, I thought about my grandma, that, like, this is the thing with movies. She just sent me to this historical journey to find out so much about this country, and to understand the people that built it and fought for it. And for me, this is the magic of documentary.
So, Paz, I want to wish you and me, I want to wish us a quiet night, a quiet Chag, quiet festival as well. And looking forward to seeing your film that you're making right now. And I'll pass it back over to Ellen.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's discussion of the film Telling Nonie. We appreciate your insights. Thank you very much, Avi and Paz, all of the thoughtful questions from the audience. As we reflect on the themes of forgiveness and redemption, we can't ignore the ongoing conflict in Israel and the heartache it brings to countless individuals and families. The current situation serves as a poignant reminder of the fragility of peace and the deep scars that linger. In times like these, it is crucial for us to engage in dialogue that fosters understanding and compassion. Today's conversation has illuminated the complexities of our shared humanity, especially as we contemplate the significance of Yom Kippur and the themes of atonement and healing. Thank you again for being part of today's event. We look forward to seeing you at future programs. For those of you that are unaware, Avi will be in the Pittsburgh area from November 11th to the 23rd, with many events open to the community. Please visit our website to register. Take care and stay safe, everyone. Bye.